I now give the floor to His Excellency Arnoldo Ricardo André Tinoco, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica.
Presidente.
Mr. President, Excellencies, Costa Rica congratulates you upon your election to head up this General Assembly, and we reiterate our commitment to advance towards a more peaceful, fair, sustainable and inclusive world. We come to this session in the midst of the resumption of the arms race, an increase in geopolitical tensions and systematic violations of human rights and of the principles of international law. With these challenges, we have an expansion of violent conflicts from Africa to Europe and the Middle East, and on our continent, the growing presence of drug trafficking and international organised crime. We are also facing the triple planetary crisis and an increase in poverty, inequality, and widening gaps and asymmetries between countries and regions, and within countries and regions. Meanwhile, our collective responses remain timid, delayed and insufficient. None of these challenges can be solved by a single state or by a small group of them. Only through multilateralism, as the central approach for cooperation, will we be able to address them and overcome these challenges. With multilateralism at the core, please allow me to share 4 points. First of all, democracy, the rule of law, and the respect for human rights are pillars for the effective functioning of the multilateral system. Democracy is the political system that embraces everyone. In it, every voice finds its echo, and every person finds their place. It is the natural expression of the rule of law. Venezuela cannot be considered to be a democracy. A democracy does not expel 8 million of its citizens, nor does it cause an unprecedented migration crisis whose repercussions are being felt across the entire Western Hemisphere. Neither does it persecute or intimidate, nor does it imprison or torture people for political reasons. A democracy does not deny opposition representatives access to vote counting, nor does it declare itself, without any proof or evidence, the winner of the elections. Costa Rica, just like the vast majority of countries in the region, condemns the manipulation of the results, and will continue to demand an impartial, transparent and independent verification. This is a verification that the Venezuelan regime has refused to carry out. There is no doubt that Nicolás Maduro did not win the elections, just as there is no doubt that he intends to cling on to power at all costs. Let us not allow repression and dictatorship in Venezuela to become the norm once again. This is not the only violation of democratic principles in my region. Thousands of people cross our northern border on a daily basis, fleeing the repression of a dictatorship that has lasted nearly 3 decades in Nicaragua. This is a dictatorship that has deprived them of their freedom, of their human rights, of their dreams, and even of their citizenship, making them stateless. Since Costa Rica is the first country in Latin America to grant nationality to stateless persons, we urge the international community to ramp up efforts to eradicate this condition of vulnerability. We also cannot continue to be indifferent to the situation in Haiti. The humanitarian crisis in this country has been met with minimal and immorally low responses from the international community. The $674 million required for the humanitarian needs and response plan represents only 0.03% of global military spending, which in 2023 reached $2.44 trillion. That's according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Allow me just to repeat that. 0.03% of global military spending. A tiny drop of hope in an ocean of militarization. Mr. President, violence and crime have grown at an alarming rate in the world, and in Latin America and the Caribbean we are no exception. Criminal networks have consolidated into a complex phenomenon that knows no national borders. These organisations engage in illicit activities such as drug trafficking, the trafficking of people, smuggling of weapons and ammunition, and have found fertile ground for growth in the region, whether due to corruption, lack of opportunities for youth, or limited police capacity to counter them. The interconnection of these networks not only affects the security and well-being of local communities, but it also has global repercussions as their operations tend to extend across transit countries and into international markets. Faced with this reality, it's essential for the international community to adopt a coordinated and multilateral approach, promoting cooperation, information sharing, and strong legal measures to combat them. Only through joint effort will the structure of these organisations be able to be dismantled, and ultimately for peace and security to be reinstated in the region. And this brings me on to my second thought, my second point. At the heart of multilateralism lies peace, and there is no peace without justice. However, its heartbeat weakens with the escalation of conflicts in Gaza, in Lebanon, Ukraine, the Red Sea, Sudan, the Sahel, Yemen, Myanmar, and in Syria. These crises expose the fragility of our collective security system and demand that all parties to the conflict assume their obligations under international law, in particular international humanitarian law. Norms and principles must be respected without exception, in particular the protection of civilians and the principles of proportionality, limitation, distinction and humanity. For each and every one of these conflicts, Costa Rica reiterates its appeal to all of those involved for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, to guarantee safe, uninterrupted and unrestricted access to humanitarian assistance, and to free hostages and detainees, to withdraw troops from affected areas, and for a de-escalation of tensions. It's also urgent to comply in good faith with all decisions from international courts and from the Security Council, because without justice, there will be no lasting peace. While expressing our deep concern over the weakening of international humanitarian disarmament instruments, Costa Rica urges states to reverse this trend and to renew their efforts to ensure that civilians do not become victim to the use of weapons with indiscriminate effects. We also urge to avoid the use of explosive weapons in densely populated areas or their surroundings, and invite all states to participate in the upcoming international conference on the humanitarian consequences of the use of explosive weapons in populated areas. This is going to take place next July, next year in San Jose. However, we must go further. Costa Rica calls for a consensus on governance frameworks for artificial intelligence in both military and civilian spheres. These frameworks must regulate autonomous systems with transformative capabilities that operate without human intervention. The Global Digital Compact that we've just adopted puts the multilateral system in motion to deal with artificial intelligence and is key for research and development, not just for its applications. Thirdly, Costa Rica believes that the international financial architecture is at imminent risk of becoming obsolete in addressing current and future challenges. Therefore, we make the most vigorous call for an international financial system that is transparent, inclusive, and sustainable. We require a financial architecture that meets the needs, does not perpetuate global inequalities, and addresses the pressing need for access to finance. This financing must be sufficient and concessional with effective debt relief mechanisms for developing countries. Costa Rica recognises the efforts of some international financial institutions to align their processes with transformation commitments, and we urge the states that make up the boards of the major international financial institutions to prioritise this urgent reform. We advocate for urgent capitalisation of multilateral development banks, and we call for an increase in the use of new and innovative financing mechanisms, such as green and blue bonds, as well as the debt for ecosystem services swaps. Middle-income countries and economies in transition, like Costa Rica, need the international financial system to provide finance tools for development. And these tools must be up to our specific needs and flexible and tailored to our fiscal and structural circumstances. We hope that the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development will bring about concrete agreements and will show the political will necessary. Fourthly, and in order to ensure the well-being of future generations, multilateralism must also be blue. Costa Rica has developed strong blue diplomacy that recognises the crucial role the ocean plays in the health of the planet. In order to have a habitable planet, we need a healthy ocean. It produces 50% of the oxygen that we breathe and is the largest source of protein in the world. It's the largest carbon sink and regulator of the climate, and 3 billion people worldwide depend on its biodiversity for their livelihoods. Therefore, it is urgent that the new High Seas Treaty, the BBNJ, comes into force, and that we deliver an ambitious treaty on plastics, so that we ensure that no mining on the seabed begins until there are guarantees that it will not have damaging effects on the marine environment. For the health of the planet and to respond to the multiple challenges that the ocean faces, I invite you all to participate in the 3rd United Nations Oceans Conference, which will take place in June 2025 in Nice, hosted by Costa Rica and France jointly. Mr. President, the multilateral system is being tested, as we all know. Its renewal will depend on courageous leadership, innovative proposals, and our collective ability to honour the principles and norms of international law without double standards. Its renewal will be achieved when we manage to shift resources from the coffins of war to the foundations of peace. The time is now. This is a unique opportunity, and the call is urgent. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Arnoldo Ricardo André Tinoco, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica.